Okay, here we go. 3, 2, 1. Hi everyone, Miranda here. So today I'm joined by the wonderful Will Kostakis. I have to say that last name gets me every time.
Why?
Because you're Greek. Because our cameraman is Greek here as well. So it matches it.
It's always funny hearing the different pronunciations of it.
How do you actually say it?
Kostakis. So you got it right. It's all good.
I got it
yeah,
right?
You got it right. It's just phonetic all the way through.
That's good.
I get Kostakidis and then some rude ones I can't repeat if anyone ever wants to put this online. So
if you don't know, Will is the author of The Sidekicks, this book here. Now, may I just say, before I get into this book, I really enjoyed it. And I enjoyed it was for the simplicity of the story, but how well you could just bring out the characters and Isaac as well. We didn't even know him, but the way you wrote it felt like we really did. So, and we got his point of view, even though we didn't. It was a really fantastic book.
I really appreciate it. No, because it's that when you're a writer, you've got to try really, really hard to make it seem as simple as possible because otherwise you just see the cogs turning. So for a long time, it was not simple. So I'm glad it came out really simply.
It did. And may I just say, before I start, this cover, for some weird reason, it reminds me of the Beatles.
Yeah, I don't see that. I think maybe it's Miles that you're thinking sort of Beatlesy.
Kind of Beatlesy.
Nah,
just the zebra crossing when they're walking across it. I see something here.
Yeah, no, I think you're the only one.
I think I'm the only one. Well, I'm the first person that said that to you. I left a mark somewhere. I guess my first question is, tell us about the Sidekicks. Plot, characters, how did you come about writing the story?
So the Sidekicks is about 4 guys, but they're not 4 best friends. They're 3 guys with the same best friend. And then that best friend passes away. And it's all about what those 3 other guys that he's left behind, the swimmer, the rebel, and the nerd, how they sort of deal with his death and eventually trace a path back to each other. And it was inspired by, in part, my own personal experience. My best friend passed away between years 10 and year 11.
Oh, wow.
I remember visiting his house a couple of years ago and seeing his photo and realizing, and I fell out of myself for a second and I was like, oh wait, I've forgotten what he looks like. And I realized I was always putting off writing a book about that experience until I was a good enough writer. But then I realized, oh no, I'm forgetting everything. And so I had to force myself to sit down and just write it. And it was just, I wanted to capture what it was like to be a 16, 17-year-old, not only dealing with the death of a close friend, but also having to restart your whole life. As a 16-year-old, it's usually you've got 2 or 3 people that you share everything with. Well, I shared everything with him, and then when he was gone, it was like there was a huge chunk of me missing. And so I had to sort of rebuild those relationships with other people. And that's really what the book's about.
So it's based off real events.
I won't say it's based off real events. I'll say it started with real feelings and real things that I wanted to explore. There are certain echoes to my life in there, but it is largely fiction.
How did you decide on the title of this book? What was the title's inspiration? Because the Sidekicks, I can kind of see where it comes from.
The big thing was, I remember I'd written the first third and I was really, really proud of it. And the character that I was the most proud of, and I didn't realize it when I was writing it, but afterwards, was Sticks, who was Bill, the protagonist's best friend. And he was basically the gay sidekick. The whole point of it was that I used him to tell a story where he had his own dramas going on, but we never saw that. And he was really just a sidekick in someone else's story. But from his perspective, he was a main character. And I thought, I showed that pretty clearly. But I remember a teacher came up to me one day. She's like, oh, Will, I really, really love the book. And I especially like that Sticks just happens to be gay. It isn't all he is.
That's lovely.
And I sat there and I'm like, that's really horrible. That's like, he can, it's like, oh, he's just as gay as a straight woman finds acceptable. And I was just like, that's horrible. I've written the gay sidekick character and I thought, right, I've got to write a story about the 3 sidekicks. Like your typical, you've got the smart ass sidekick.
It's always the case. The
gay
rebellious one.
So it's the rebellious smart ass. You've got the gay one with all the issues. And then you have the sort of shy, nerdy one who solves everything but gets none of the credit, aka the Hermione.
The Hermione.
And so is
it kind of based off Harry Potter with the Ron, Harry and Hermione?
No, not at all. No, Harry doesn't have a personality.
There we go.
No, oh God,
poor Harry
shots fired.
Potter.
You just see the YouTube comments now and just go, what did Will say? But yeah, so I was really inspired by that idea that we are all sidekicks in someone else's story, but we all think that we're the main character. It's all about that when someone who is very definitely a main character like Isaac, what happens when he goes away and he leaves these 3 people who relied on him so much. And that's how we got the Sidekicks.
This book is divided up into each of the three main characters' point of view. And exactly what happened to Isaac and his relationship with each of the characters are expressed through, you know, each of the characters' points of view. And we never actually get to know Isaac anyway. How did you come up with each of their stories separately? Like, did you write it from start to end, or did you go off and think about one character before going to another character? How did that come across?
I knew the main story beats of each of their arcs. So I knew that Ryan was going to really come to terms with coming out. That's what the first part was. That was pretty locked in. Harley in the middle, I had sort of no idea what I was doing with him. I'm like, great, I'll just make it up when I get there. And then when I got there, I'm like, what do I do?
What do you do?
And it took about 3 or 4 drafts. Then I eventually found out what his arc was. His arc was about, you know, building that relationship with other people. With Miles, I knew that his was going to be the saddest, and I knew where Miles's was heading because Miles's story was actually written when I was in year 12. So I wrote that part as a major work for English. But it was very different then. Miles was a very different character. The main story beats with the footage and things like that, that was all a part of Miles. But then it came time to, I realized there was no real ending. And then organically, I don't want to say what it is, but there's something that I started mentioning in all of their parts. And I realized, oh, that would actually make a really nice set piece at the end. And so it ended up building up to this really almost random final scene. The publisher's like, are you sure you want to put that in there? I'm like, yes. And it was really wonderful, and it ended up coming up with an ending that just really, really worked. It was a mix of really, really planning and then sort of just being like, okay, I have a deadline in a month. I'll come up with something. Yeah.
So it was Harley's like that deadline.
Yeah,
deadline
Harley's
mark?
was the last.
It felt like his character as well, because he's a bit of the rebellious guy. That was the thing.
Because the problem was, as I was writing him, he sounded just like Ryan. And my main focus with this book was to craft 3 unique voices. He was sounding really intellectual like Ryan. Ryan is sort of that doesn't know he's smart, but is smart because he's the son of a head of English. So it sort of influenced the way that he writes. With Harley, what I had to do was I ended up rewriting it all from scratch as first draft. So I didn't touch it after that, which was scary. And he actually has tics in the way that he speaks. Like he says should have instead of should have. And every time Word would change it to should have, I'd have to delete and write no of. And it's like his whole section is just one long green underline where it's like, you know, sentence fragment, sentence fragment. I think it really, really worked because he was so unrefined. And then Miles was just so like rigid, no contractions and things like that. The whole point with Miles was to try find warmth in that, which was really difficult to do.
But I found how you just interweave them. We never got like Isaac's whole point of view. We never even got to have one because he was so cleverly written into each of these characters' points of view. With Isaac, did you, when you were writing it, want to know what sort of message you were giving across?
The thing is, the publisher was like, why don't we have an epilogue at the end that shows that Isaac was really a nice guy. By the time you get to the end, that's quite ambiguous. What I wanted to say was, no, the whole point of Isaac is that we are different people to different people. We are the heroes in some people's stories and we are the villains in others. And you really see that where he is Ryan's champion, you know, he is Harley's worst influence, and he is just really cruel to Miles. I wanted to show that, you know, that breadth, and I wanted to leave it ambiguous. I really think that keeping him ambiguous is where the strength in his character is. So if you go back and you see some of the things that he doesn't mean to say harm Miles, it's just their dynamic and it's what they've fallen into. Really, really wanted to play with perspective. That's what the whole book is, and it's not simply just, I'm going to retell this scene from someone else's point of view. I wanted to show what a different character would notice about a different person.
This book is based in high school, and when reading it, I mostly related to the character of Ryan, purely because my mum's an ex-teacher. So I can remember going into school with her, getting to know the teachers, you know, outside of school, sitting in the office and all that stuff. Did you use any of your high school experiences and bring them into the book?
It wasn't so much when I was at high school, it's everything that I've noticed since in touring schools as an author, going in, seeing the back end, going into the teachers' rooms, the staff rooms, hearing the really horrible conversations they have about students. Because you have this amazing image of, you know, teachers are the greatest people in the world. They're going to inspire us. You go into the office and they're horrible. They're just like making fun of students. They're swearing, they're racist, they're homophobic. It's just baffling. Some of the really horrible stuff that you hear teachers say in the book is just direct quotes when I'm sitting in an English staff room as as an author, hearing,
wow.
okay, those are some interesting thoughts about gay people.
Let me just put this in my next book. Do you use that as your research, right?
Yeah, I thought it was really fascinating because Ryan is struggling with how does he come out, and the reason why I made his teacher the English teacher was because when you go to high school, that's your chance to sort of test out your personality, see who you are. Very difficult to do that when you're always under your mother's watchful eye.
Definitely.
And so I wanted to really, really explore that. And I always feel bad whenever I visit a school and I see a kid goes to school with their mum. And I'm just like, oh, spread your wings. Says the 27-year-old who lives with his mum. But, you know, let's just qualify that statement. I think it comes through the novel. It's that I'm a young male who was raised by a single mother. I hope that that closeness between me and my mum comes out in the different kinds of relationships that these boys have with their parents, especially their mothers.
I was raised by a single mum as well.
Yeah.
So I definitely know how it is. That's why I related a lot to Ryan and his perspective and what he had going, and his struggle as well with coming out was just so evident, and you could see it there that he just wanted it so much, but it was all of what society had to say and what people, like how they would pick on him and all that stuff. It was just so horrible.
Yeah, because I wanted to look at,
sorry for him.
We're in a world now where kids are YouTubing their coming out.
Yeah.
And they're doing it
it's
for
a major
millions
thing
of views.
on YouTube.
And everyone embraces them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why then did I wait until I was 26 to come out publicly? Things like that. Like I told my family slowly over 2 years before that, and my friends a year or so before that. Why did I wait until my mid-20s really to start coming out to people in my life? Ryan was really my vessel through which I asked, why am I in the closet? Why am I doing this? And I looked at all those different pressures, you know, that subtle homophobia. When we think of, homophobia, a lot of people go, oh, I didn't bash you, you're fine. But there's all this other stuff that slowly just cuts you off at the knees each time you go to speak. I really tried to capture that in Ryan as he sort of finds his way out of the closet, and he eventually just sort of trips and rolls out of it.
All the boys get themselves into some sort of trouble within this book. And I think my favourite would be when they sneak into the teacher's office.
Yeah.
Now, did you put some of your rebellious high school experiences in this book? And if you have any, let's share.
See, I wasn't rebellious. The closest I came to rebelling was writing a story that featured all the staff at the school in it, and then it being found by a member of staff. But you know, I was pretty straight-laced.
You're a good student.
It was that whole, what do I wish I did, you know, and that's the wonderful thing about writing young adults. You can sort of go back and you can push the bounds of reality a little bit. You can be like, you know, what do I wish I had the guts to do, or what did I hear about some kid doing once? I wanted to start the story. They find out their best friend dies on page 1. And I'm like, right, okay, what's the fewest number of pages I can put between that and like an Ocean's 11 style caper? And I'm like, right, and it took me, I think it ended up being about 7 or 8 pages before they're there, breaking into the teacher's office, doing all this stuff. And
fantastic.
I'm just like...
And the locker as well. You can forget the locker.
That was it, because I wanted to get to that question, raise all those questions. How well do you know the people in your life? And it was sort of, it's making fun of Desperate Housewives a bit, because it was always like, oh, someone's died. Oh, they have this huge convoluted secret that's going to take 22 episodes to tease out. Ryan's there. They end up finding a wad of cash in his locker. And Ryan's just there like, oh, you know, and he's trying to think of all the different things that could have led to that, but you don't find out until you get Miles's perspective in the third part.
And that's what really just kept me reading, because you just found out with all these different perspectives, all these different little things. It was fantastic that way. Who is your favourite character in the Sidekicks?
Oh, it was a late addition, but Miles's mother, I really, really, really love. Harley's dad as well. I was really, really worried writing the book. Once you take out teachers and parents, there is only one female character, and that is Jax. I love writing female characters, and so it was, but I knew if I wanted to explore what it's like for 16, 17-year-old boys to grieve, then it had to really look at that hypermasculinity, and to look at that, I had to strip out as much of the feminine as possible. Jax is there.
She was pretty cool.
I just loved writing her. So she started out as 2 separate characters. And I was like, okay, this character's in the first half of Harley's and disappears, and there's this other character. And I'm like, okay, let me just merge them together. She was really, really good fun, you know, no nonsense.
Just straight to the point.
Yeah, and she's this aspiring lawyer who will, you know, interrogate you and things like that. And so she has a soft spot for Harley, who isn't particularly bright.
Any favourite moments? Just favourite moment. If you could pick one. I know this is quite a hard question for any author to answer.
Love the ending.
The ending?
Like,
yes, the ending.
Please don't Google
cool.
it, because some reviewers have like, I don't want to spoil it, but here's the ending. And I was like, why?
Not spoil it. We won't spoil it. But in a nutshell, what do you love about the ending?
Because I hadn't planned that as the ending. That ending was actually the end of Harley's. Yeah, so you were going to know that, then read Miles's.
Yeah.
And so it shifts.
Oh,
so there's,
Oh, here we go.
I just really liked getting them to that one point, and I think it's just a really, really, really lovely moment. I remember I was writing it it was 1 o'clock in the morning, the day it was due, and I had about 4 or 5 other plot points afterwards. I'm like, okay, I've got to get to that, I've got to get to that, got to get to that. And then I wrote that scene, I'm like, no, that's the ending. And I just deleted everything else that was supposed to be in it. And so the book is about 2,000 words shorter than it was supposed to be.
Oh.
I can't top that ending.
Yeah.
And it has to end like that.
What motivates you to write? Do you drink tea or coffee as well? That's a major question I always ask now.
I drink neither.
Neither? Oh.
A deep sense of narcissism inspires me to write, and thinking that what I am thinking in my head is worth thousands of people reading. That's what inspires me. But it's also just something I've always enjoyed doing. Even if no one read my work, I really, really love just sitting down, writing, sharing stories, and the fact that I now get to do it for a living and that people read it and enjoy it.
It'd be a dream come true.
Yeah, it really is wonderful.
What other genres interest you? Do you have any favourite books or authors that you get inspiration from?
I really, really love fantasy, but not super duper like this is book 7 of the inheritance cycle, we must take the ring to Mordor stuff. No, more Terry Pratchett, philosophy, really dark humour, lots of rude jokes. I think Terry Pratchett's Discworld series, especially the books following Granny Weatherwax and the Witches, are just remarkable. I try to read pretty widely because I find that if I read something too close to what I write, I end up emulating it and it sort of all gets muddled and my voice, I sort of lose it. But if I read something like Terry Pratchett, I know there's no way I can do what Terry Pratchett does. And so it's really nice to just sit there and go, wow, this guy is a pro.
Where is the Sidekicks available? Where can you buy this fantastic book?
You can find it at any good bookstore. You can visit your local independent bookseller or, any of the chains. If they don't have it, you can ask for it, they can order it in. Or you can head online, all of the online Australian retailers stock it. And there's also the ebook as well.
I got it at Collins Bookstore.
Nice.
What is next for you? Any upcoming events that we can know about? Any other books that you can secretly tell us about?
The events of fluctuate and change, but I can tell you about the next book that I'm writing.
Ooh,
I've learned the lesson of don't talk about a book before you sign the contract for it.
There's a...
So, I'm not going to give specifics, but it's more so that the first third, which was the book that came out before the Sidekicks, is about a small, potent Greek family, and it was all about me asking what it would be like, if my grandmother was on her deathbed. My grandmother is one of the most important fixtures in my life, and that was a pretty emotionally harrowing book to write. And then I wrote the Sidekicks, which is basically just like, okay, now let's revisit that really harrowing death from your childhood.
They're all based off something.
And so I'm emotionally exhausted after 4 years of this. So I want to write something a little different. And, growing up, I watched TV shows like, say, Charmed and, those light sort of magic realism, fun sort of stuff. I want my next book to be fun. I've got the idea for it, and there might be a bit of that fantasy coming through, but that's all I'll say at the moment. But hopefully it'll be in stores within the next couple of years.
Did you always want to become an author?
Yep. Read Enid Blyton, and I was like, that's what I want to do, only without the racism.
Where did your love of books start from?
My mum was really, really big on books. I remember, my first memories are her thrusting books into my hand. We came from a family where my grandmother came over from Greece with, 2 kids, a sick husband, and a suitcase, and that was it. And they wanted to build a better life. Went to high school, and the idea of a present was my grandfather buying them the Encyclopedia Britannica and going, are you bored? Read that. You've got to be smart. And that was that same thing. My grandfather would walk up to the local newsagents and buy paper and pens because he knew we liked to write and draw. All these people in my life, they wanted us to do a little better than the previous generation. Like my brothers and I are the first ones in our family to go to university. It was really just cultivating that. That's what, built my love of reading and eventually writing.
And if you could go back in time to your younger self and give one word of advice, what would it be?
It would be more than one word. I'd just say don't be in such a hurry. Like for me, it was like, I've got to be a 12-year-old author. Okay, I didn't get published this year, 13-year-old author, 14-year-old author. So when I got my book deal at 17, I felt like I was a disappointment. Yeah. And now I go back and read my first book, which is called Loathing Lola, and I'm like, oh, you can tell a 17-year-old boy wrote this.
Really?
It's just like boobies, boobies, fart joke, boobies, boobies, fart joke. I am far more proud of the books I've written since, and I really think I needed those 2 or 3 more years to sort of find my voice and find the sort of story that I wanted to write. So I'd tell my younger self, you know, doesn't matter, it's going to happen.
It's going to happen.
But that's the thing, if I didn't get that first book deal when I did, who knows if I would have had that second book deal when I did.
No.
It's just...
We're getting a bit psychic, yeah.
Just got to, you know, come to terms with the fact that there's a book that was released when I was 19, and it's good for what it is, but I think it's actually my best young adult book.
Yeah.
But now that I'm sort of an adult, I'm sort of removed from it.
Yes.
I'm just like, oh, this isn't... Because there are the young adult books that are really great for teenagers, and there are the young adult books that are sort of trying to be good for both.
Yeah.
I think as I've gotten older, almost selfishly, my books now are catering to both markets, and you can't cater towards adults without sacrificing something on the younger scale.
Definitely.
So I think with the new book, I want to veer back, maybe without the boob references, back to sort of what I was doing with the first book.
So I'd really love to thank Will Kostakis for coming in the studio talking to me today about his book, The Sidekicks. Make sure to definitely go pick this book up. It is fantastic, and it's a really light read. I mean, look at that. It's only 200 something pages. You can read this in a heartbeat. It's fantastic. So I'm Miranda. This is Will. Thank you so much for watching. See ya!
See ya!